Coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for another episode of Tech Talk with your host, Joey Klein.
Welcome, everyone. Hope we're having a good Friday morning. Another great episode of Tech Talk. We've got three fantastic technologists and agency folks with us today, as always. First, we're going to talk to Roxana Shershin, CEO of Digital Additive.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Next, we're going to get with KP Reddy, founder and CEO of Shadow Ventures.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And finally, Chris Weissman, Chief Marketing Officer at TopRight.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. All right, guys. Let's get right into it. So, Roxana, your world is very much about emails. And all of our worlds are really emails these days, but you have made a career of, I would call it being a connoisseur of emails. We're going to get into exactly what Digital Additive does, but I want to first start at a high level of why emails are so interesting to you.
Okay. And I'm totally stealing connoisseur of emails for my business card after this podcast.
I mean, I gave it away, so it's all yours.
What has made me actually really excited and passionate about email is that it's perhaps one of the few media channels out there that was really created to be personal from the get-go. I mean, the whole point of email is to drive, conversations and create a dialogue, what mail used to do, old-fashioned snail mail, used to do. And email was created to do that. And it's such a great tool that is also available not just to, individuals, but also, marketers themselves. And the trick is really how do you take advantage of what is a personal communication and use that to drive relationships at a broader scale with companies and their customers.
Did you realize that email had this potential and was this new paradigm upon its inception, and you've just been waiting for a way to introduce it into your professional life, or the spark kind of came later as it's inundated everyone?
If I had the foresight, I would be a lot richer right now because I would have created one of the platforms that we are working off of. But no, I mean, I think with anything at this point, it's being, I came out of direct mail actually originally and then worked my way into television and, just love the idea of having these personal connections with people, but yet still have it measurable. And I'm super geeky, so I love email because there's so much measurement available to it that helps understand like how well did we do in making something communicated to a customer. But oh no, I'm totally opportunistic in terms of how I landed into this field, and I'm just lucky that landed into a field that I really enjoy working in.
Well, sorry. So we've been dancing around what Digital Additive actually does. So let's get the elevator pitch.
Sure. So the elevator pitch is, we've been talking that we're obviously an email agency, but what our focus is in how we marry technology, data, and creative to really deliver on this promise of one-to-one. What email was intended to do from the beginning, create a relationship, have a communication between two individuals, or multiple individuals, depending on how you use CCs. But how do we work with large companies who have amassed a lot of data really about their customers and help them take that data and all their great products and services and help them package that in a way that delivers a relevant and critical message for those customers and do that at scale. So we work with really large companies who have all that data and find ways in how we can craft emails that when the customer receives it, it's not just, oh, it's another email blast of what's on sale today, but it's really delivering to me what is on sale, but that actually means something. So if I've been browsing, let's say I'm on Home Depot's site and I'm browsing drills, don't tell me about refrigerators that are on sale. Make sure you're telling me when the drills are on sale and making sure that that is as relevant as possible.
So all of us live in a day and age where we are completely bombarded by emails to the point where it can really seem like the junk mail flyers that we throw out. Mm-hmm. And we wonder, why are people spending money on this? And so it seems to me like your thesis is that there is probably so many organizations doing it poorly that to stand out and do it in an impactful manner is actually not, maybe it's not as heavy as a lift as we think.
Yeah, you just have to be real intentional about it. I mean, the thing is, email is also cheap as heck. So it's I liken it to like a slot machine. It's really easy to pull that lever and send email and do it en masse and send a bunch of stuff, like you said, that resembles a junk flyer. That's real easy to do. And that's the problem, because it's cheaper than, at least in direct mail, there was an expense to sending all those flyers, right? Email, there really isn't that much of an expense. We're talking pennies on the dollar. So you have to be intentional about it. And especially because it's cheap, you have to really think through, what your customer wants and put your customer first. It forces companies to think about their customer as individuals and what they want, as opposed to thinking of it as a slot machine for revenue to be brought in by just doing an email blast. So it requires that intentionality.
Why do you think that you and your team are so much better at these organizations that you work with of understanding how to be intentional? Why is this something that marketing departments within, your large customers have not been able to solve themselves?
Well, we'd like to say a lot of them have that idea. They want to do it. It's not like there's this desire to not do it. It's technologically difficult. I think we use the term analysis paralysis quite often. There's just so much data that is collected, and it's often in a variety of systems, that it's really hard to extract what to act on and how to pull it in and how to transform it. There's a lot of work there involved. So what we do is we partner with them to really take their idea, because often we're not coming to them with this new idea. Hey, talk to your customers like individuals. They already want to do that. It's how to do it that becomes sort of the blocker. And what we do is we'll come in and help figure out not just what they want to do, but all the pieces that they might have available to them that they don't even realize come into play, and help map out how to marry that together, bring it into, we're actually a Salesforce partner agency, and we bring it into that platform and transform it and action on it using that technology.
So I'm curious if you can share what are some of those, I don't know whether it's insights or capabilities that maybe they have but aren't able to fully harness, that you guys help them understand better.
A lot of it, you'll probably get a really good sense here, that we're the really geeky side of email. So it is, a good example. I'll use one of our clients, example.
Okay.
So we do a lot of work with the Home Depot. You may have heard of them.
Sure have.
Okay. We've done work with them for a number of years. And so one of their ideas is, they have, hundreds of thousands of SKUs and people browsing their site all the time. And one of their relevant ideas that they wanted to be able to deliver to their customers is notify them when there is a price decrease for a product that they've recently engaged with. Great idea. But there isn't like this database already at the ready that says these are all our price drops for the day and what individual person looked at those products. So trying to understand like what all those data elements that were needed in order to make that email happen is where we came in and said, okay, well, we already have all the prices for all the SKUs plumbing into this system every day. So let's take a snapshot of yesterday's file, compare it to today's file, do a lot of business rule logic against it to make sure that those price decreases are valid. And then we mapped it out and said, all right, well, then who has all of the SKUs mapped to the individuals who browse those products? We then transform the data, push it to them. They're able to marry it, add their business rules, like how recently would they have had to browse it. They do the mashup. They send it back to us. We then transform it one more time against another layer of business rules and then send out the email. But mapping all of those steps out and uncovering where all those elements reside is hard because it's not like they all reside magically in one place.
Yeah, that's a great real life example, and that's an enormous amount of precision. And what I wonder is, okay, when you think about all of the people who Home Depot has information for, and you think of, again, all the SKUs they have, and you think about, your, really what seems to be your charge as a company, which is to be intentional by email. How is it even possible? I mean, clearly it is because you're doing it, but how is it even possible to get that intentional with so many people with such particular, one or two SKUs? I mean, I guess that's the secret sauce, right? But it's somewhat incredible that you're able to actually execute on that.
Yes. And that's where I think that's where the value we bring in is that it's that analysis paralysis. It sounds like such a huge lift that it's easy to just say, well, you know what? Just send all the price decreases.
Right.
And let the customer figure out which one's relevant to them. Honestly, it sounds real complicated, but once you break it down, and we've been doing this now for 7 years, once we're able to break it down, that whole process that I just mapped out, it took us 6 months to map it. So I will say it's not like it happened in a 1 week whiteboarding session. Yeah. Took us 6 months to map it out, but all of that data work happens in the matter of 3 to 4 hours. So the price decrease happened last night, and that email is going out by 1 p.m. today. So, and it happens every single day, like clockwork. But yeah, no, there isn't really a secret sauce, honestly. It's just really understanding the business, understanding what the customer, would be relevant to the customer to see, and then, and figuring out where we're near Halloween. I'll use this analogy, where all the bodies lie, like where all those data opportunities lie, and uncovering the ones that aren't as obvious. That's the trick, is finding the places where it's not readily apparent that it's there, but how are you creative in finding the solutions that will get us to where we need to be? So like that, the price decrease, there wasn't this readily available file. But just even trying to creatively figure out how do we create that file in a way that's, stable and accurate.
Okay, so I'm going to give you another one for your business card. So you guys are like data detectives, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
So you've got large company with massive treasure trove of data, and the easy part would seem to be collecting all that data. The hard part is figuring out what to actually do with it. Mm-hmm. And there are many different actions that can come from that data. And so you are one piece of that. You're using all that data to help them figure out, this is how you use the data for emails. Okay. You want to go use the data for other purposes. That's, that's other people, whether it's internal or external, but specifically on how to better target via email. We're going to take this data and tell you things, that you either didn't or couldn't know yourself, and will actually be able to execute on something that would have probably taken you a while if you could have done it at all.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it starts with initially, again, we really focus on what's a customer centric, value add from an email perspective. What is it that the customer wants to see, and then back into how can we deliver on that promise, or that, that request from the customer perspective. But yeah, no, absolutely. Data detectiving. And then there's another layer of even more geekiness of like, then how do you build an email itself to also be that hyper personalized, right? So it's one thing to know that you want to see a drill, but then how do you make that happen real fast and at scale to show that specific drill in the email and the pricing that's relevant to that store? So, it's fun. So geeky, and it's so fun.
Well, you have to have passion, right? I think that we've all been to cocktail parties with people that on the surface might do something that doesn't seem terribly interesting in an unsexy industry, but their passion and enthusiasm for it makes us passionate and enthusiastic as well. That, the expertise and the care is infectious, and well, clearly that's why you're running this company, right?
Right.
So, one thing that I'm thinking about is that email has taken the place of physical mail in our lives, right? In terms of how we communicate. Are there other forms of communication that you're looking at to I don't know about diversify or hedge or just, we live in a world that changes so quickly, technology, that, does the team focus on other forms of communication that might not necessarily replace email, but serve as a complement to help, your clients get in the door even more?
Oh, absolutely. And, ultimately it is about one-to-one. So we're always looking at other channels that are also in that one-to-one sphere. So SMS and text, but that one's even trickier because that to me is a huge, intrusion sounds real strong of a word, but from a marketing perspective, I don't think it is that. I mean, I think it is an intrusion. So it can be. So we look at using SMS for transactional. Like if you're buy online, pick up in store, SMS, text messaging for that purpose to let you know when something's available in store is a totally viable use case for text messaging. And we do a lot of transactional work as well. That's what they call anything where you've made a purchase or are engaging with the brand, and there's a very specific expectation that the brand is going to respond very quickly. So text messaging, in-app messaging. I know we all have like those notifications that we get for the apps that we subscribe to or have downloaded. So we also work on those to make those as relevant as possible, not just generic. But those are new. The in-app messaging in particular, how to use that in an effective manner is fairly new. But we're always looking at other ways to craft that one-to-one experience.
So, I mean, text is an interesting one. I wonder if you think there's any demographic analysis behind it, because I have noticed that, I've always been in sales of some sort. And 10 years ago, total faux pas, even necessarily to try and like prospect with someone on their cell phone. It was just, you don't do that. And now I think you can probably divide into age groups, but I can't tell you how much, work, and, kind of the sales process actually gets done over text with some people. They're very open to it. Mm-hmm. And it can be limiting in the type of message you're able to get across, but I really have found that it has blossomed in the past decade, but probably only for certain groups.
Oh, absolutely. And, but I do think it's like with anything, as much as it has blossomed with certain groups, even that's expanding. Yeah. So, folks would have said, oh, it's just really a millennial channel, probably even a few years ago. I think it's becoming less and less specific to that. Just as even, but on the flip side, also people used to say about 5 years ago, similarly, also the millennial and younger generations are not even going to engage in email. And we have found that to not be the case. So every channel has had sort of their own adoption curve, if you will. So for text messaging, I do think you're right. The earlier adopters tend to be more demographically driven, but we're finding, especially with the types of messaging that we're use casing off of, that it's less and less of a demographic. If you're buying online and picking up in store, I know I'm going to harper on that use case because I love that use case. I don't think that has anything to do with the age group. In fact, if I can know that it's available for pickup at the Carter, the kids' clothes I just ordered are available at that Carter store right now, it would be great to have that available to me via text. I
mean, look, I think it at the end of the day, it depends on the type of person and what sort of use they're looking for. My wife's grandfather is 90 and he is, he uses his iPhone, probably more than we do. Right? It's just, it works for some people and it doesn't necessarily matter what age group you're in. Yeah. Although I do think, and I am an older millennial, I have found that I think those that are maybe 6 or 7 years younger than me and that sort of younger half of millennials, I feel to a detriment do tend to rely a little bit too much on the text communication when it's like, we could have just picked up the phone and accomplished this in 60 seconds if we wanted to. But at the end of the day, it is a compelling tool for communication that's clearly not going anywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's funny. Even, one of the things that always amazes me is how much transpires on things that were used to be like handwritten notes or phone calls, like even the hiring process, how much of that is even done via text.
Right. Although I think that's why handwritten items are so impactful because it's so rare. Like you send someone a FedEx of just, a single page handwritten note. I mean, it's like it's like Benjamin Franklin took out his old, like quill pen in the 1700s and wrote you a personalized note. It's insanely impactful, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, cause it's so personal, right? That's where everything is. It's impactful when it's so personal. Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of handwritten thank you notes. In fact, I was writing them this morning.
But of course, you cannot do that at scale. That is not a marketing strategy. No. So let's talk a little bit more about digital additive. So you landed on the Inc. 5000 last year. And I always wonder when I look at organizations that have received awards like Best Places to Work and Inc. 5000, what do you think you're doing right other than the fact that you have a compelling product that companies are paying for? Like, yes, that of course accounts for revenue growth, but what is the intangible behind why your organization is thriving?
Honestly, it's our people. I mean, I cannot say enough great things about we're about 47 folks at Digital Additive, and a number of the team members have been with us for like 5 of our 7 years, which is incredible. And having that longevity with that passion and having people grow with us has been a big part of that success. I don't think you can be successful I'm sure there are lots of companies who do this, but be as successful in maintaining that level of expertise and passion if you're churning through folks. So developing a culture and a focus on, everyone who's part of our team is really important to us. So that's actually what we spend a lot of time and energy against, is making sure, we we hire real slow, but in finding the right people to join us and to grow with us over time. And knock on wood, that continues. But it's definitely the folks that are on the team that make it all possible.
Well, it would seem that for any organization it should be, but certainly for one at your stage, that hiring has to be intentional, just like you're intentional in your messaging and with your clients.
It's the hardest thing right now too.
Yeah. Well, let's chat about that a little bit. So I remember when you and I first talked, you are not, remind me, you're from Florida or New York?
No, I'm from Miami.
Miami. Okay.
Of all things. Which is like New York in Florida.
Right. It's like you go far south enough and it just sort of reverses itself. Yes. Yeah. And I'm from Atlanta originally, but did not think that I would end up here. And you expressed a similar sentiment. And so I'm curious the role that you think Atlanta and its talent has played, in the growth and future of Digital Additive.
That's a great question. So I will say that my unpublished motto for the city of Atlanta is the city that grows on you. Because honestly, like when we first met, I knew for certain I was going to be in Atlanta for 2 or 3 years and then go to New York because that's where I thought I was supposed to be. And that was back in 91. So let's just say that never happened. And it has played a huge role. I think Atlanta is such a great, has provided such a great foundation where it's a small enough community, especially within digital marketing, that it's small enough where everyone knows each other, but that there is something truthful about Southern hospitality. I don't necessarily feel this competitive component to everyone that sits in that circle. In fact, some of the folks who have done the most help when we were first starting the agency and growing it are folks who are also doing very similar things to what we're doing. So having that camaraderie and support system was a major influence on founding the agency. And even our first few clients are all folks who we had worked with in the past as well. So there's this real sense of community and relationship that is valued here in Atlanta more so than I think other places, to be honest with you. And even a lot of our employees, probably more than half of them are referrals, either from employees or clients or friends of friends. So the sense of community I think is real unique here and is definitely a part of that success.
All right, Metro Chamber, if you're listening, new motto: test it out. The city that grows on you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that is not gonna focus group well, but it's like the antithesis of San Francisco. You fall in love with that city, and the longer you're there, everyone I know who's been there for a while is like, I can't do it anymore. Whereas the longer I was here, it's like, I love this city. I could see myself doing this more, and I have now, got married, have kids here, and I'm so happy that this is where my kids will have their childhood memory. Well,
and look, I'm on the same page as you are. I didn't think I would stay here either, but it really is fantastic, for all the reasons that you said and more. And it does grow on you. It's grown on my Northeastern wife who had, unfair conceptions of what the South was. But it's a similar story I've heard from many people. And, look, I don't think the Metro Chamber is going to adopt that marketing strategy anytime soon, but it is better to have a long-term dedicated population than, you're attracted to this shiny thing that then, loses its luster.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if someone listening wants to learn more about Digital Additive, how do they find you?
Well, they can find us on the World Wide Web.
Oh, wow.
I
really?
know.
Yeah.
Digilaladditive.com, but also, anyone who wants to reach out to me directly, feel free to do so. It's, Roxana. This is actually, I do have an email address that doesn't have my last name, so we'll use that. Roxana, that's Roxana at digilaladditive.com.
Great. Roxana, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Okay. KP with Shadow Ventures. How are we today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So before we get into the business stuff, we have to address your taste in music because I often see you and in your LinkedIn picture as well with a Metallica t-shirt on. And as a metalhead myself, I think it is fantastic that you go around as a business person promoting awesome music. So let's back up a little bit and talk about your musical tastes.
Yeah, it's actually interesting, Gen X, right? So fill in the blank of all the stuff. I'm pretty cliche Gen Xer. So it's actually funny, I do probably now it's down to about 50 speaking gigs a year. And everybody expects me to show up with the Metallica shirt on every time. So it's kind of like, no, I only actually have 2 and I don't wear them every day.
So you mean they're not sponsoring you?
No, probably the opposite.
All right. Well, and another interesting thing, if you go to your LinkedIn and, before we started this show, I asked how you want me to introduce you. And the question is very relevant with you because you have a lot of stuff on there. And of course, most relevantly right now, you're associated with Shadow Ventures, which I want to get into. But you have been a part of many, early stage technology companies, throughout the past decade or two. And so let's first talk about Shadow Ventures, but then I want to get into the past a little bit and how you got here.
Yeah. So Shadow Ventures, it's pretty straightforward. We're a venture capital firm. We invest seed stage, $500,000 to $1.5 million. They have to be real technology companies, not made up technology companies. So food delivery apps are not technology companies. So we actually invest in really hard stuff. We're mostly based here in Atlanta, although we only have one portfolio company here in Atlanta. We have a portfolio in Scotland, New York, Austin, San Francisco, doing a bunch in Tokyo right now. So I think we've been trying to schedule this podcast for maybe 6 months. Part of that's just I'm usually only here Fridays.
So you made a statement, a little bit, and I'm sure some of it was humorous, but I know there's a little bit of truth behind it. You said we invest in real technology companies,
yes,
not, quote unquote food delivery apps. And, anyone who has seen you speak knows that you are very outspoken and blunt. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here because I know you'd be a good conversation, but I want to get your opinion to drill down on what exactly you mean by that. Is that you are focused on certain types of technology, or you feel like there are technology companies that are maybe overvalued, invested in too early, that don't deserve the dollars? I want to hear it.
Yeah. So, in order to invest in technology, you have to know technology. Like we have a full-time tech team. We have a CTO that's a partner in our firm. We want to see actual transformative technology that's hard. It can't be outsourced to India. So usually one of our big filters is if you're outsourcing your tech, you've just outsourced your business. So if you can outsource it, then it's probably not a tech company. One of the things we've done really well, startups always take long. It's never a linear path to growth. If you do not have defensible technology, then someone that can hire a couple of smarter people and a couple $1,000,000 more will beat you in the long run. So it's all about building highly defensible. Technology was meant to look like magic. Once it stops looking like magic, it's not technology.
How do you find that your process for filtering those organizations has developed throughout the years?
So actually, part of what we've done, which is pretty interesting, we think venture capital has been broken for a while. It's actually not engaging in a way. It's starting to look like higher risk private equity. If you look at Atlanta, we think we're the only VC here. There's really a bunch of firms that place money and invest later stage when all the risk is out of the equation. We call that private equity, not venture capital. And part of that risk quotient has been not having the right teams. Like, you have to look at code. You have to know what you're looking at. You have to be better at the tech sometimes than the founders are to really understand what's going on. And, part of our model has been really to focus on those technologists and focus on the tech and augment and be part of their team.
How are you finding these people?
So back to our process, it was heavily dependent on me, which is not scalable. So we have actually built our own AI engine that does risk analysis, sentiment analysis, exit probability analysis. So we've taken my 28 years of experience investing and building companies. We've actually started porting that to an AI engine because we think VC hasn't been innovated. It's funny, you have VCs that invest in tech and still use Outlook. So, that's their primary technology they're using. So we've really tried to innovate that. So we do some really cool stuff around customer sentiment analysis, recruitment sentiment analysis, exit sentiments, predicting who the exit possibilities will be, not just based on the startup's path and how they're moving, but also the potential acquirers. If one of your acquirers or potential liquidity events is to a large company that has not made an acquisition in a year and their internal growth rate is actually exceeding what an acquisition would look like, why the hell would they acquire you?
So does this technology normally come in the vetting process before you bring someone in to talk, or you've got a charismatic founder comes in, they give you the proverbial deck, and you are verifying that, well, okay, this seems interesting, but what's the data behind it? Yeah,
so generally the charismatic founder will not get anywhere with us because they're generally full of shit. So we vet those people pretty well. We ask them, like, so when's the last time you've written code? If you haven't written code, you're not in technology, get out, basically. We run an incubator program. It's a global incubator, so we have companies from Singapore, New Zealand, all over the world in it. And we run that all virtually using technology. Let me speak slowly. So we don't think space is part of incubation. We think talent and connections is really the incubation process. I don't care where you are. And if we're not leveraging technology, then, what are we doing? I'm pretty much the only one on my team that is on planes constantly, and that's just kind of the nature of the leadership position I'm in. But we run everything virtually. We have about a 28% acceptance rate in our incubator. And in order to get in, we want to know that you're solving a problem worth solving. I don't think we were all complaining about getting pizza on time 10 years ago. All of a sudden, apparently, it's really important that we get food delivered. We don't think that's a real problem, unless it was a food desert scenario. But generally speaking, we want to know, one, are they solving a problem that's worth solving? Do they have a solution that has the potentiality of being defensible? The reality is almost every deck we see that says AI on it, there's no AI, right? It has the potentiality of applying AI principles to the technology. With that said, sometimes AI is not the answer. So we want to see that, most of these companies haven't had enough capital to build any real tech. And so therefore they don't have anything defensible just yet, but we want to see potentiality. We accept them in our incubator, our labs program, based on that. And then once they're in, we train them, we teach them. We have about a 28% acceptance rate. We have about a 28% we kick them out rate.
Okay.
If you don't do the work, we're sitting here working. If you're not going to do the work and do the important work, then we kick you out.
Is the incubator you're referring to the Combine, which I know you've been involved in?
Combine's one of our companies. We've sold that off.
Got it. Okay. So Shadow Ventures is your focus, but you have a long history of being involved with early stage companies and building them yourself. So what do you think it is about your personality that draws you to this sort of work?
Actually wanting to solve problems, create impact. I think that's the big thing is there's Shark Tank is dumb. And anybody watching it is watching the wrong thing and spending their time on the wrong things, because it's all about real entrepreneurs are always trying to really solve some problem some problem that someone's told them that is unsolvable. So I always joke around the best entrepreneurs are engineers because that's what we do. But I think the track record has been, first company when I was 19, took my second one public when I was 26, has always been if you solve problems faster, better, and more creative way than anyone else on the planet, you will win every time.
Okay, well, so solving problems is part of it, but there has to be some inherent piece of you that enjoys whether it's risk, whether it's never having the same sort of day. Yeah. Right? There's something internal there that's driving that as well, besides just solving a big problem.
Yeah, I think working for people is terrible. It's indentured servitude at some level, right? The idea that we're hooked on, I've got to have benefits, go make a bunch of money and you don't worry about benefits, and I think all of us wake up every morning with about 2 seconds of free will, and then we remember we have to pay our mortgage and we have to pay our alimony or we have to pay whatever's in our life. And after that, by that third second, our free will has been given away.
But of course, okay, so I don't disagree with that.
Right.
But not everyone has that, let's call it risk appetite, right? Some people would buckle under the weight of that type of a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So while that works for you, the world has to have, we can't have a bunch of yous, right? Because who would work for your companies? Well,
right? So the running joke in our office is, there's people in the matrix and there's people outside of the matrix, right? So, we believe we're outside of the matrix.
Yeah.
But we're building, I get my team doesn't like me saying this, but we're building an army, right? So part of our methodology of everything we do, everyone on my team, their mission in 5 years is to run their own fund, right? So I'm not building a team to just do the grunt work. It's a team that's actually going to run their own fund, and I'm building venture capitalists. When you look at our entrepreneurs that we're investing in, when they choose to move to the side of I'm done building companies, I'm ready to be an investor, come join our firm. So this virtuous cycle we're creating is this idea that, don't you want to be a VC, but here's what it's going to take. It might be a 20-year path. Go show me what you got, and then you can come to the firm.
Well, and whether it's in your industry or another, that really is the best type of leadership, because what you're doing is not only are you giving back and truly developing someone, but selfishly as well. Look, there's an altruistic side to this and there's a selfish side to this, because as those people develop in their careers, that's just more connections and more relationships for your own business as well.
There's nothing altruistic about what we do. We spot talent that is high potential that we believe, whether it's because of the current construct of gender bias, race bias, whatever, we hire very talented people, like hyper talented. Mm-hmm. And they're there to produce. They're there to produce, and they're there to deliver numbers. And I think that's how we look at our entrepreneurs. I would say there's people view some of the things because of my hiring decisions, view things as being altruistic. And I think it's terrible that if I hire a young African-American woman, people are like, oh, KP, so nice. He's giving back. I'm like, no, she's actually fucking amazing. And she's here as much to deliver. And, the fact that everybody looks at this bias like, oh, he's doing great work by hiring this person. I'm like, that's not what happened. Like, I'm hiring someone that's amazing.
Well, I don't mean altruism in that you are doing someone a favor that doesn't deserve it or that's a detriment. I mean it in that you are actually taking an interest in someone who has done the work to get in the door and deserves to be developed.
Absolutely. They've earned it. And I think that's one of the things in corporate America and kind of people that are living in the matrix. 90% of the people out there don't deliver. Bottom line, right? They show up, they do the work, they don't deliver. And the few that do either may get frustrated and stuck in that corporate engine, and the few that don't pop out.
So if that's part of your calculus, have you found that your work at Shadow Ventures when I say is easy, I don't mean that there's not a lot of hard work to put this together, but if your thesis is correct, that there's a lot of companies out there that don't deserve to get funded, that there's a lot of funders out there that shouldn't be investing in some of these companies, is it easy to stand out from the pack?
Yes. We're on fund 3. We're killing every quartile. Period. I mean, look, whatever I say, whatever hyperbole comes out of my mouth, whatever adjectives I shouldn't be using and that I use, look at the bank account. We're crushing it.
Yeah. You have been in Atlanta for a long time.
Unfortunately.
Well, so let's talk about that, right? I don't know if you say that with tongue in cheek or realistically, but I am curious about your take on what Atlanta's done in technology in the past 30 years and where we're good and where we need some help.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to stop talking about ourselves. I mean, I have the good fortune of spending time. I grew up in Stone Mountain, went to Georgia Tech, so I'm an Atlanta kid, so to speak. We did this big annual summit, and I had our friend, the lieutenant governor, come and speak. And last minute, I was asked to do his introduction instead of our MC doing the introduction. And so totally unprepared, I said, here's the problem. I'm the biggest fan of Georgia and Atlanta, and I'm also the biggest critic. But at least it produced me. So we look at it and we say, everybody needs to get to work. And some of the things that people find very comfortable about Atlanta is the biggest thing that holds us back. If you exit your company in Manhattan for $25 million, the only lifestyle change that occurs is that walk-up that you rented is now a walk-up that you own. But the next day, you're back at work. And there's a little bit of the comfort here that breeds mediocrity in a major way, because it's comfortable. Guess what? You don't always get to your kid's soccer game on time. Sorry. That's just not how that works. Hopefully you get to most times, but not all the time. And that's one of the challenges. I think if you live in a situation where you can be comfortable, which is what a lot of people describe Atlanta as, comfortable, quality of life, that's actually code that says we're never going to swing for the fences.
Do you think that, so I'm wondering if you think that any of that has changed a little bit in maybe the past 15 years because we have so many transplants from other regions of the country that are used to working differently and thinking differently and have, maybe don't get lulled into that.
Absolutely. That's why they come here. Right? Because they're done, right? They hate San Francisco. They hate Manhattan. I have investment banking friends that basically I was tired of the grind in New York. Atlanta's great, right? I mean, which is fine. That's great to attract people from other markets and all that. But they're not coming here to make more, do more, make an impact. They're coming here because they're burned out on places that are of high impact.
Well, so isn't that partially an opportunity for those who can be and want to be high impact to stand out?
No.
How not?
Because we don't have the platform, right? If I I had a great lunch this week with a serial investor here in Atlanta. I'm like, give me $5 million. And he's like, well, let's talk. I was like, this is the problem. I go have that conversation in Hong Kong. I get $5 million. That's how that works. We play small ball because people come here. I mean, there's also a question too. If you are the top technologist in the world, why are you in Atlanta? You want to go play and compete on a field where other top technologists exist. If you're the top VC in the world, why are you going to focus on Atlanta and be the big, there's a little bit of, big fish, small pond kind of thing, which is fine. I mean,
well, that begs the question, what are you still doing here?
My kids are here. That's why I'm only here on Fridays. Yeah. Our third fund, we have 0 investors from Atlanta. We've not talked to a single investor in Atlanta for our fund because it's been an absolute waste of time.
How does that ever change? Because, I mean, that really is one of the problems.
It's not a problem.
How's it not a
Everybody's
problem?
content with the quality of life. If you want this place to change, right, if you want to, things need to be expensive, right? You should not be able to buy a house for under $1 million in Metro Atlanta, and then you will attract the right people. It's too comfortable. Everybody can make their mortgages way too easy.
I think we've just found the antithesis of the Metro Atlanta pitch,
right?
Or the Metro Chamber pitch. Excuse me. They probably don't take you to those corporate relocation pitch meetings, do they?
No, it's tough. I was telling this investor today. I was like, I'm friends with all the powers that be. I'm friends with, and I'm a difficult friend to have because I'm rarely wrong.
Rarely wrong. A man who knows himself.
Yeah.
A lot of the technology that you invest in is associated with commercial real estate, whether it's architecture and engineering technology, property management, whatever it might be. This is one of the industries that has, I think, taken the longest to truly be disrupted when we look at a lot of the other major industries in this country. I have my own theory about that being in commercial real estate, but I'm curious as to why you think it is just now really you hear so much more about CRE technology than we have in the past decade.
Yeah, and to be clear, as a firm, we're not focused. We have Fund 1, 2, and 3 have all been focused on construction tech and property tech. We'll be launching our healthcare tech, fintech. So we're starting to explore and evaluate other markets. Mostly focused on leadership. My background has been innovating in telecom and real estate tech and construction technology. So I was kind of the guinea pig for the firm. As I start adding partners in other markets, we will start adding other categories of expertise and investing. The bottom line is the industry's cheap. It's low margin. It's backwards. You have to look at history and you have to look at lineage and where people come from. A lot of people go into commercial real estate because they were born into commercial real estate. It is not the majority of people creating wealth in real estate and commercial real estate. It's highly inherited. It's highly driven. The mass majority are driven by my father, my grandfather, my great grandfather. If you spend time in New York, it's very, very clear, right? Everybody was born on third. So if you look at that dynamic, there's no incentive to do better. There's no incentive. It's just fine. Everything is fine. And when you view investing in technology, it's viewed as money out the door versus actual getting an ROI. So the real shift we think there's a couple of things that are happening. One, we have a labor crisis. If you talk to any commercial real estate person, hiring property managers, retaining them, it's very, very difficult. So you have massive turnover. If you look at construction, nobody knows what a hammer looks like anymore, much less is willing to swing a hammer. So you have a talent pool that's just zero interested in trades and all that. So you have one part of the perfect storm is the talent shortage. Secondly, the technology's gotten cheap. When I was deploying technology on a job site 22 years ago, I was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to run sensor controls, to run systems on a job site, to manage it. All that can be done with an iPad and $100 these days, right? So the technology's come way, way down, which is important to a market that's low margin. You can't sell high-end technology, expensive technology into an industry that has really low margin, right? It's a mismatch of how it works. 3, you have a generational shift. The great-grandkid of whoever that's taking over the family business enjoys the spoils of the family business in terms of money and being in the right country clubs, but is generally pretty bored and wants to do something different, does not want to do things the same way grandpa did it. I've had some CEOs and think about it, if you're 40-something years old, you started your job having an email address, right? You lived in, there were no good old days. You had to accept the good old days from dad that I was going to look at a 3-ring binder and do analysis, right? So what you're seeing is those people are now in positions of leadership. And I had one CEO of a $12 billion company tell me, I get better data from my kids' middle school than I get on my business, and I get it all on my iPad. Right? So
that's damning.
Right. So you start seeing the generational trend saying, this is nuts. Like, I'm running a multi-billion-dollar enterprise and I have people showing up to my office with 3-ring binders. This is nuts. And actually, much of what they categorize as data is actually opinion. And so why are we not gathering that data real time from real sources? So I think that the third leg of the perfect storm has been the generational shift.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it obviously presents a ton of opportunity in a massive industry. One of the, and I think that this opinion probably fits somewhere in between one or two of yours. Certainly the generational shift is that Traditionally, I think you've had a lot of people in commercial real estate who, well, of course, either have inherited it or they're just not the type of people that think outside of a tangible product. I think that you can sometimes divide the world into people who see things in tangible terms and those who are comfortable with what they might not be able to see and touch right in front of them. And a lot of people, I think, of former generations in real estate have been those who are very comfortable with that literal steel building right in front of them, as opposed to a new generation that is more open to technology, marrying it with that tangible product.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it, right? The lack of imagination is what you just categorized. But I think that's also why you see, when you see the lack of diversity in commercial real estate, you know, you get out of college, you have to go 2 years without making a dime, you know, so you can build your book and all that stuff. That's very hard for like first generation college grad to go do. So inherently there's bias towards people that already have wealth and can take the 2 years to quote unquote build a book, right? Build a book for their future. So that's a good reason why you tend to see like the lack of diversity.
That is a very good point. And it's, it's also, I mean, it's the same sort of rationale as people who can take on paid internships, right? You have this amazing opportunity at a wonderful company. They get up on your resume and you can take the 3-month hit in the summer because you have something to fall back upon. Yeah.
It's interesting. We did an experiment this summer. We had summer interns, all college students. We paid them all $15 to $20 an hour, and everybody's like, well, why would you? I'm like, we pay people because there's a goal, there's an expectation of
delivering. Because they do work for us.
And they have to deliver.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to have an unpaid, I mean, it's kind of criminal. The unpaid internship thing is basically criminal. And if you look at it, I mean, I did some work with, Clark Atlanta, and, you know, when I was running ATDC at Georgia Tech, and I was spending time at Clark Atlanta and Morehouse, and Georgia State for that matter. You look at Georgia State, you look at Kennesaw State, you look at Clark Atlanta. Those kids can't even afford to do a paid internship. I mean, I talked to kids at Clark Atlanta that at night, you know, nights and weekends, they were bartending. They're like, KP, I make $700 a night cash. How am I going to do an internship? Like, I can't pay my bills. Even if you pay me $20 an hour, I can't pay my bills, even though I should be investing in my career. I should totally agree that it is the right career choice to do a professional internship, but I'm out making $700, $800 a night serving drinks. Like, how do you compete with that? And I don't have the choice to say, I can't, you know, I'm going to like suck it up and go invest in my career. That's not an option on my.
And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for that person's life. Yeah. It really is amazing how that has developed. Like I had plenty of unpaid internships and I was fortunate enough to be able to do it. And it just wasn't even a thought of, well, I have no power. I'm 19 years old. So what do I do about this? It really is one of the cruelest tricks that corporate America has ever been able to get away with. And now it just seems accepted.
No. And I think it's what I've been disappointed is in the startup community. It's become worse. I mean, the level, we talk about diversity and all that, but you talk about just people having a chance, right? Which I was fortunate. I figured it out, right? I worked 3 jobs through college and figured it out. But not everybody gets lucky, right? I mean, you got to work hard, but there's a little bit of luck involved. But now we live in a world, and especially in the Atlanta market, the startup community has now equaled white privilege. If you look at folks hanging out at ATV, they're just hanging out. They're not worried. They're not stressed. They're, you know, because their family has money. So you now have this white privilege dynamic building, not diminished, in this city. And none of them know how to write a line of fucking code.
Well, that probably just makes it. You know what? It makes it even easier for you to spot, I think, who's going to be good for Shadow Ventures and who's not.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of people playing startup.
Well, that has been, as for as many companies as have been birthed through that is one of the criticisms, that it is a little bit of a frat house, just post college for people who think they're playing technology.
Absolutely. And because they can, right? I mean, unfortunately, the kids that are going to grind it out and work hard. I had somebody ask me the other day, like, KP, why don't you have a diversity or whatever fund? And I was like, because I have shareholders. I have investors that I have to deliver on. And unfortunately, the only thesis I can deliver on of why to do a diversity fund is we would basically get better valuations because women and people of color don't have access to capital, so I can negotiate a better valuation would be the core of my thesis. And it would work, but it'd be kind of shitty.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually an interesting company that I had on a past show called Enrich Her, which is
Roxana.
Yeah, Roxana and Tiara. So, they're building a platform for minorities, women who cannot get access to the normal traditional capital markets channels to help fund their companies. And there's, as you have identified, a real need for that.
Absolutely. The challenge is you got to go get big money.
Yeah.
Like, $1 million here, 2 million. Like, you got to go get 50, 100,
I recognize that. At a certain point, theirs will help some, but to truly be impactful, to have the icons of, the new rock stars of entrepreneurship are probably not going to come from those small amounts of money.
Right. And you have to, in order to sustain, right, the risk cycles. We also have a dynamic right now. We have an entire generation that's never been through a down cycle, which is massively problematic around how they think and how they manage risk and how they believe risk. 2006, I had $10 million of loans capital called within a week that I had to replenish. I went, had to get to work and hustle and raise $10 million that was pulled when there was no capital, right? So that drives a certain behavior and a certain hustle that if you haven't been through, you don't even know what to do next.
Yeah. You're absolutely right about that. Look, we could go on for a long time, but we got to move on. KP,
right.
Thank you for coming on. If anyone wants to learn more about you, how do they do so?
Shadow.vc.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Chris, you've been waiting patiently. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Good morning.
Okay, so I think that, and again, for those listening, Chris is the Chief Marketing Officer for TopRight. And we're going to get into what TopRight does, but I want to talk a little bit about your background because you really seem to be kind of a I know normally you use a term like classically trained pianist, but you seem to be, if you look at your resume, a classically trained chief marketing officer. And I'm curious about how your experience with really big brands like Honey Baked Ham, like working with clients like Coke and Conagra, how that has prepared you for everything that you're doing at TopRight.
Well, it's a great question. I think the biggest thing is being a consultant now and having classically trained experience, you have the opportunity to see different problems. And what you learn over the course of client engagements and company engagements is that everybody faces the same challenge. They're all trying to change behavior. They're either trying to get someone to do something differently, do more of what they're doing, stop doing what they're doing, and move. So if I'm Coca-Cola or if I'm XYZ company that's just starting a new venture, 99% of the time, those companies, those consumers or those customers are already doing something. They're buying Pepsi because Coke doesn't exist. So how do I get them to change the way they think? How do I convince them to make a change, stop buying Pepsi and start buying Coke? And it's the same whether it's in B2B or B2C.
And so we talked a little bit with KP about the personality that drives what you do every day. And I'm always curious about those who are in marketing. Have you had interest in psychology and persuasion? Like what is it that because there is something deeper that, like if you are privileged enough to have a job that is more than just a job, there's something inside of you that drives you to do what you do, that you get intellectual satisfaction out of that. And so I'm curious to dig into that.
Yeah, KP talked about a few things that really resonated with me. We're all about exploring what's possible, what's available to do. We're always looking to try and understand more deeply the consumer psyche. So anthropology, psychology, human behavior all drives how we think about marketing. So yeah, I ironically enough, I was a psychology major my first semester of college, and
got it right.
I hated all the reading. I fell asleep half the time in the library, and said, there's got to be something different. Now that wasn't being lazy, KP. That was just me recognizing that I didn't enjoy reading tomes about Nietzsche and what have you. But there is a psychology to marketing. It's not just about shilling products. It's really understanding an unmet need and figuring out how to fill it better than anyone else.
And let's before we get too far down this rabbit hole, let's talk about what TopRight does and then discuss that within the framework of TopRight.
Yeah, no, that's great. We're a marketing consulting firm, and we're really interested in focusing on three areas. One is simplification of the story that a company has. So why do they exist? What role do they play in the ecosystem? How they create value? So really simplifying that for our clients, then clarifying their strategies. How are they going to take that story and translate it into messaging that resonates with consumers, that changes their behavior? And then systems, which is the people, the processes, and the technology to actually execute those strategies. So we'll work with clients that some will call us and they'll say, we've been in the market for 1,000 years, and now the technology has changed the way the market exists, and we now have no real reason for being. And they'll say, can you help us transform our story? Or we'll have new ventures who will say, we're entering into a market where there are already 2 or 3 competitors. How do we find our place in that so that we're not just saying we're just like company A, but cheaper, which is only sustainable for as long as till company A decides to lower their price. So we're constantly looking for ways to help people grow. I mean, we're really in the growth business.
And one thing that you tout a lot in a lot of your literature is transformation. This is not just growth, but transformation.
Yeah, it's really changing the way they think about their business, the way they market their business. Yeah, I would say 99% of the clients that I deal with will say, well, this is what we do. This is what we're all about. This is what we're all about, what we do. And I'll say, nobody cares what you do. No one cares what you do. I don't care if you're Coke or Pepsi or Dow Chemical or the local company down the street. What they care about is what they get from what you do, because everybody's very self-serving. Again, whether you're a business or a consumer. And so we transform them by shifting the way they talk, and we ask them to begin to talk about themselves. And we use research to really get at the root of why they exist and the value that they create in the marketplace that makes them distinct and make them preferred.
Why is that? And look, this is something that anyone who's read, Simon Sinek's books understands that why is powerful. And of course, anyone who has read, your founder Dave Sutton's book understands that as well. But what is it about the way that humans think and make decisions that why is so impactful?
Well, because I think in nature, humans are very self-serving. They're looking to satisfy themselves. They want to know what's in it for me first. Now, people will talk a great game about being philanthropic and what have you, but when it comes to basic needs, there's something that's in it for them, whether it's a functional benefit, whether it's an emotional benefit. You think about some of the things that you buy at the grocery store. People, you look at market share, people buy Philadelphia brand cream cheese. Why? Because it's better than the generic cream cheese. It's cream cheese. It's made the same. It's a product. But people have some emotional connection to Philadelphia brand cream cheese. I trust that it's going to allow me to make a better cheesecake, or it's going to allow me to do that. So there's this psychological need, and consumers want that feeling, either a functional value or a psychological value.
What was and I asked this and we talked a little bit about it with Roxana. Any sort of any services company, and obviously you both have technology built into your services, but any services company, I always wonder, and not in an offensive way, but why do you exist? Why can an organization not do what you can do internally with their talent? And so, it of course gets to why you're special and why you do what you do.
There are a couple of reasons, I think. I think one is, I think when you're within an organization, you get a little bit of groupthink, you get blinders because you know what actually exists in the company, and you create paradigms and barriers that do exist or don't exist, and you don't have the ability to think more broadly and outside of what you live every day. So I think that's part of it, is people, we've had client engagements in the past where you're there for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and we have to move people off because we call it going native. Because they've been at the client for so long that they start to think like the client, and they create and construct these barriers. I think the second is everyone at TopRight has a plethora of great experience at different businesses. And so when you're able to go to a client and sit down and say, Kraft Foods had a very similar problem. Let me explain to you the process that we went through to fix that at Kraft Foods or at Alcoa. And it helps to settle people because they understand you've seen that problem. It may not be in their industry, but having an understanding, clients having an understanding that you've seen something like that and you've fixed it for somebody else, there's comfort in that.
Going native, I love that. It's almost like a little bit more of a friendly type of Stockholm syndrome, where you start to, identify enough with your captors, right?
Yeah, no. Ironically enough, it happens. Someone's there for 2 or 3 years, and you'll have a client review meeting, and they'll start to say, "Well, there's no way that can happen. There's no way that we can do that. They have these things," and you say, "Time out. Do they have those things? Really, would you have thought that 3 years ago?"
Yeah.
And you really have to force them to go back or challenge them and say, you end up treating them like a client. And at that point, when your people become like the client, it's time to find.
They've been bitten by the zombie. They need to be quarantined.
Perfect. Exactly.
Right. Well, so that kind of goes into your, how you acquire talent, because you need someone, it would seem, who has the entrepreneurial drive to jump from project to project, but also the corporate demeanor and experience to be able to embed themselves within that team.
Yeah, consulting, I think, as a whole, is tough to get into straight out of college, and people do it at McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. The way you're successful there is you're super analytical, and you just are very passionate, and you're willing to learn, and you're willing to pay your dues and sit and listen. And the value that you bring is changing colors on PowerPoint presentations and taking notes. Because so much of the consulting business is about building trust. And I think Roxana would agree. If they don't trust you, they're not going to hire you. And it's hard when you're 23 or 24 years old to be able to have that top level conversation where you don't have stories to tell. You don't have battle scars to share. You don't have the experience to be able to bring to bear. And so what we do is we tend to look for people who are rock star marketers, and who are able to step in and bring thoughtware. It may be I was the assistant product manager on Diet Coke at Coca-Cola Company, which means you're fairly low on the totem pole, but I'm the one who introduced the, NASCAR promotion, and we did this. And so you take them and you say, I now have somebody who has great experience building a promotion, working with partners. And so you begin to look at their skills. What skills do they have? Mm-hmm. And then you bring them in and you leverage those skills while giving them exposure to a different set of skills.
So you've been with TopRight for maybe a year and a half or so?
About a year and a half. But
okay.
But the CEO, Dave Sutton, and I go back 16 years. He hired me, brought me to Atlanta 16 years ago to work for the Zeman Group. Sergio Zeman was the chief marketing officer at Coca-Cola. Mm-hmm. Started a consulting firm. So Dave and I have known each other for a long time, which is why I'm back at TopRight.
Well, and so that's sort of what I wanted to get at. So obviously you and Dave have a long-standing personal relationship, but what was it about the organization that he was building that drew you to it at this point?
In consulting, especially in marketing consulting, everyone is focused on trying to help companies grow. And I think we're all about bringing simplicity, clarity, and alignment. And when I sat down with Dave and he talked about how he wanted to do it, it was actually very simple, very clear, and it was aligned with how I think about growing companies and marketing. And so if you're walking your walk and you're talking your talk, if you actually can live those values as a firm, you know that that it's not just a shtick that people are using to try and win business.
Well, and then of course that speaks a lot for not just his talent, but also his integrity in the organization that is being built. I'm curious we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the segment, but you came from a large brand, you came from working with very large, and obviously you still have large clients, but you are within a little bit more of a growing entrepreneurial type organization, and I'm curious about. Is it a mindset shift? Is it really that big of a change? What are you bringing from your past experience to kind of help grow TopRight?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. One is a breadth of experience working on both big and small brands. Working at Kraft Foods, obviously you learn discipline and rigor and process and all of those things that come with companies that invest a tremendous amount of money in training. But then working at a company like Next Generation Network, which was a digital media startup company, where when you wanted to make a decision at Kraft Foods, you wrote a deck, and it was a 40-page deck, and you took it to your boss, who took it to their boss, who took it to their boss, and pretty soon after someone, every one of them had fine sanded it, and it finally got to the person who made a decision. It looked nothing like what you started with, but everybody had put their fingerprints on it. At a company like Next Generation Network, you walk to the office next door, you say, this is what I want to do. They say, okay, what is it going to do for us? And you spell it out and you go. And so being able to have that experience both in a entrepreneurial environment where you make decisions and go, but also in a process-driven organization where you deal with big bureaucracies, I think it prepares me to deal with the breadth of clients that we have, because we do have big clients, but we also have small clients. We have clients who have technologies that will say, we'll do consulting for you for a piece of the business because we think you have an idea that we think has real market potential, and we'll take a piece of the business because we believe so strongly in it that we think we can help you make us a lot of money.
Well, and that speaks volumes to the type of organizations that you're getting involved with, because that's not just a client assignment at the end of the day. Anyone can do that. That is, you have a real stake in building this organization to, the best that it can be.
Yeah, it's true. And we take that approach with all of our clients. We're not foolish enough to say, as part of our pay, we're going to take stock from
right.
Clients that we know the work we're doing isn't going to be the thing that swings the stock price tremendously. But we look at every one of our clients as if it were our own business. We treat it as if it were our own. I look at it no differently than I did when I was the CMO at Honey Baked Ham. This is my business. I have a passion for this. I'm here for this. And so when I walk into a client's office, I have a passion for growth. One, because it serves the client well, and in all candor, it serves me well too, because they'll keep me around. They'll continue to compensate us.
Well, that's the best job security, right?
Great work is always the best
Absolutely.
Job security.
You work with a lot of different types of industries, anything from nonprofits to healthcare to oil and technology. And it would seem to me that in order to do that, you have to have a process that is generally repeatable and somewhat industry agnostic.
We do, and it's the 3S playbook I talked about earlier. It's the story, the strategy, and the systems. You have to have a real curiosity, though, to be a consultant, because to go and have a client and you're working on emulsifiers, and then you're shifting from that to working on a digital media platform. Being able to really get excited about emulsifiers and the market for emulsifiers, it's you have to be curious, you have to want to learn. But you want to understand, at the end of the day, whoever is buying those emulsifiers for the products that they're making those products to satisfy a need. What you do in that small segment has to help them to fulfill that need. That's how they command a premium. So you have to have the curiosity, but the process and the structure, the construct of saying, you may have the best email marketing campaign in the world. Roxana may be killing it for you in terms of execution. But if you don't have a story that resonates, you're just sending emails that wind up in the dumpster bin. Right. Because I don't know why I care when I get an email from ABC Company. I mean, we all trash 90% of the email that we get. Why? Because they don't speak to what I need. They're not connected to me in any way, shape, or form. I didn't ask for them. But if I get an email from somebody that's obscure and they know that I had done something previously and they're able to tailor that in a way that speaks to my need, they understand how to translate their story for me, right? And I think that's probably what Roxana does with the bulk of her business.
Oh, I think that curiosity gets you a long way. I think if you look at the commonality of what the four of us around this table do, whether it's from a client-facing perspective, a portfolio company perspective, you have to be curious about what other people and other businesses do, because otherwise, what is the point of even doing our jobs? If you don't care and there's not something in your mind that has to know about that thing that you just never knew existed, or that unsexy product that is impacting a large portion of the population, I mean, you can't do any of what the four of us do.
Agreed. It's a challenge. It's interesting listening to both KP and Roxana talk. Top Right sits sort of between the two of them. as an organization where KP would have a venture and he might have a technology that is revolutionary. I think where we would sit is in between saying, okay, now that you have this technology, how do we translate the technology into a story that resonates with the most number of people? We'd build that story, we'd build the strategies, and we'd say, okay, here's kind of how we think about pushing the execution of the strategy out, and we would look to someone like Roxana to help us make it better. So how do we build the story, and then how do we execute the story?
You have tied it all together very well. So if anyone listening wants to learn more about TopRight, they can read Dave's book, which is called Marketing Interrupted. In addition, if they want to contact you or learn more on the internet, how would they do that?
They can contact me directly on email at Weissman, that's Weissman, at toprightpartners.com, or you can look at our website at toprightpartners.com.
Fantastic. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining, and thank you for listening to another episode of Tech Talk.